let's get started here. Let me talk about the upcoming schedule. So, obviously tonight, Jason's presenting, and then next month we have um, a GDE from New York City, I think, um, and he's going to talk about using Square Workflow in Android for Android and iOS, which should be pretty cool. And then in June we have local Googler Ben Baxter. We were going to ask him to like if he wanted to talk about Android TV, but he said he'd rather talk about unit testing best practices. So he's going to be presenting on unit testing best practices, which should be good as well. And then in July, we've got another GDE, local GDE, and used to be Atomic Robot employee, Sierra O'Brien. She wanted to present on ML-Kit. And then in August, don't have anybody scheduled. So that's why I have TBD and a question mark with you, which brings me to my next slide. We're always looking for presenters. So starting in August, I think, we don't have anybody signed up. So if you would like to present, like Jason or, Ben and Sierra, all those people, just send me a message or Patrick a message. It's really easy to do these presentations, and it doesn't have to be something amazing like like what Jason's going to be doing tonight. But it's easy. It's an easy, a good friendly, audience. So it's good to like. It's a good environment to practice your public speaking. And then here, because it's a GDG event, I need to go over our community guidelines. Basically, just be nice, be respectful and constructive, be collaborative, participate. Unfortunately, we can't participate because that's the way this platform is. But anyway, you can participate by talking in the chat. So just keep it clean, and be um, be respectful. And of course, we always ask for feedback. So if you have information about this presentation or the group, what you'd like to see, um, you know, there's a link there. It's pretty easy, just bit.ly GDG Cincy survey. That's still a working survey, and we would like to have your information so that we know what kind of presentations to do, or if you don't like the format or whatever. So, or if you don't like the format and you have ideas for suggesting a new format, that would be helpful too. So, really, that's all I have. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me try to figure out all this fun stuff. All right. I think I've got it all set up. So let's go ahead and get started here. So we'll go over just a quick session overview of what we're going to be discussing today. Basically, just briefly touch on like my journey into leadership from transitioning from engineering into leadership. Touch on some of the transition pitfalls that I ran into. Go over what exactly being a leader means and what are the roles and responsibility that a team lead has. What are some of the challenges that we have, and then I'll make sure to leave some time at the end for some wrap up and some questions. But let's jump into like why I feel like I am qualified to um, uh, Wait, which did I share? Did I share the wrong one? I did share the wrong one. Thank you. I've been in the remote space for over 3 years, and I'm still learning how to do it. Let's see here. Which one is this? Thank you, Patrick. All right, cool. So let's just talk about a quick thing about my background, my journey of basically where I started and where I got to today. I graduated from the University of Dayton in 2009. I effectively started writing code professionally the day after I graduated for a local company. I started out writing VB6 for a desktop application, transitioned into .NET WPF. I actually dabbled a little bit in the mobile space for a while, writing Windows CE apps, which was a miserable experience. I did some web development, all that stuff. And then I transitioned into leadership in 2015. And for me, it was a slow transition. I was working at a smaller company. My teams were relatively small. And in retrospect, the promotion was actually more of to a tech lead as opposed to just a full-time, full-blown team leader. I was still expected to write code, and the actual my growth into leadership kind of built upon the building of my team up into a more manageable size. I transitioned into the mobile space in 2016. It's funny enough, I actually got switched over to the mobile space because I started coming to the Google Developer Group meetups here in Cincinnati, and the company that I was working for needed someone to take over the mobile space, and they knew that I was the only one that had any experience, and my experience consisted of coming to about 6 of these meetings. But in hindsight, it's been 6 years now, and I've loved every minute of it. I recently switched companies. I'm now working with Rocket Mortgage based out of Detroit. I'm a remote leader, which has its interests and its own challenges. And I was actually talking to Craig about this before we started, that I was originally scheduled to give this talk in April of 2020, and something came up and we couldn't get the meetup to happen. So we decided to postpone it until COVID was over. So I'm actually grateful that we held off on giving this talk, mainly because now I have a experience at different companies working and seeing how they view leadership, and really allows me to, I feel like, give a better representation of what it takes to be a leader, having more experience under my belt. Having said all that, I do have a quick caveat. 100% of the stuff that's in this talk is 100% my personal experience. Every company is different. Every leader is different. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt, mainly because your results may vary, basically. I hope that you get something out of this. If you're looking to transition into a leadership position, basically just give you my what my experience and what my process was like. So having said that, if you're interested in being promoted to a leader, you've started that conversation with your manager, or it's something that has been talked about, like they're basically saying, hey, we need a new team lead, that we're thinking that you might be a good fit. Is this something you'd be interested in? The number one point that I want to get across in this entire talk is the most important thing is transitioning from engineering to leadership is not a promotion, in my opinion. It's just not. It is always equated to being a promotion, but it is not. What it effectively is, it is a career change. Your roles and your responsibilities drastically change when you transition into a leadership position. I always thought that I went to college to basically be a headphones on, hands-on keyboard, like that was just going to be my career. And when I made the transition into a leadership position, it definitely changed what my roles and responsibilities were, and which I feel like works better for me. I actually love being a leader. I've done a lot in my coding professional career, doing a bunch of different stuff, but I like to have that same kind of challenges just on a team-wide level. So I wanted to touch real quick on some of the transition pitfalls that I actually had. And one of the biggest pain points that I had is I never really had anybody that kind of laid it all out there that said like, hey, this is a career change. And one of the big things that you need to come to the realization is that you're no longer the go-to engineer to fix everything. At the company that I was working at when I first got transitioned into leadership, it was basically just, hey, you're the best engineer on the team. You're now the leader. But I was still expected to write code when my teams were smaller. But as the teams grew, my responsibilities became more and more team oriented as opposed to specific units of work features. The biggest thing that I had to learn to do is to actually delegate work out properly. You can ask my wife. There was a lot of times back in 2015 and 2016 where I would come home from work and get back on my computer and try to fix all the stuff that I knew that was coming up, because I didn't want to bug my team about it. It's just like, hey, I know I can get this done. I know how to fix this. I'll just go ahead and fix this off the clock. That way I don't have to mess up my team's flow. And to be honest, in hindsight, that was absolutely terrible for me to do because it was bad for my work home life balance, but then it also wasn't allowing me to show my team that I trusted them to fix things. If word got out that I was fixing mistakes behind the scenes, it really just wouldn't help me establish that trust as a good leader of my team, where I have that trust to delegate stuff out. And the other biggest thing is being able to derive results without writing the results. That was something that I took pride in a lot as an engineer, was like holding something up and be like, hey, I wrote this code, and people be like, hey, this actually is really cool. Let's show this off to different clients and customers. And in the transition into leadership, you still get those moments, but they're a lot more team oriented. And I think that's a mind shift that you have to have, where you think about things more of just like, it's not so much I was able to create this, but it's like, what were we able to create? So let's touch base on like what you think a leader does. And this particular part of my talk is a little bit weird because now we're still remote or still virtual. So I can't have you guys all shout out what you think a leader does. But when I was an individual contributor and a leader, I wrote down some of the things that I thought my leader did on a daily basis. So one of my things is running meetings and creating new meetings and forcing engineers to be in more meetings. Life would be empty without meetings, dreaming about creating even more meetings, and most importantly, getting excited to deny PTO. Now, I say this, I've never actually been denied PTO in my professional career, but for some reason, I always felt like my manager or my lead was just laughing at the fact that he had the ability to cancel PTO or to deny PTO. And it's something that I've never done either, because to be honest, as long as you have PTO, I don't really care when you take it. But so those are the things that I thought my leader did, was basically just like being in charge of meetings. And there's a lot more involved into it. So if you're looking into it, let's actually jump in and actually talk about what are some of the responsibilities that being a leader does. So these are the four core components of an individual team leader, in my opinion. And these are prioritized by importance. My number one thing as a team lead is to improve team members. I succeed when you succeed. And this is a big thing that I strive with my team, is knowing that like my role in this company is to make sure that every single one of you go where you want to go in your career. And part of that is by building effective teams. And that's another point, that the number one and number two is building that effective teams that are working together and are able to lift each other up. The third most important thing is obviously we've got to get code and it's got to get released out to clients. The most effective way of doing that is to making sure that number one and number two are completed. And then lastly, representing the team to stakeholders. And we're going to dive deeper into each one of these things, but representing team to the stakeholders is just being that face when you're in the meetings with with all of the different CTOs and different business areas that are interested in learning what your teams are building. So let's jump into improving team members. And this is something that, as a new leader, it can be challenging to learn how to evaluate team members in a constructive way. As an engineer, everybody has opinions on everybody's different abilities as an engineer. But your role as a team leader is now to get your team members to grow in their career and in their abilities. And one of the best way to do that is by building constructive and actionable improvement plans for individual people. And this can be a little bit challenging because normally when you're on a team, there are actually different types of people on your teams. And I've had the pleasure of working on 2 different team structures. Right now, I'm actually the team lead of quality engineers, software engineers, and product owners as well. So, and I've never had to lead product owners before, but it's definitely a different type of growth plan that you need to come up with to be able to get people to that different level of where they want to be. Some of the best ways to do each one of these things of building actionable and constructive improvement plans is to ask team members their goals. One-on-ones are extremely valuable in my opinion. It helps build that relationship with the individual team members, but it also allows you to give a platform for your team members to voice their opinions, what they're wanting to do. Are they currently an associate engineer and they have dreams of being all the way up to a staff engineer? And if that's the case, building out a plan to get them there in the next 5 to 10 years, and working with them to make sure that they know what those particular steps need to be in order to accomplish their goals. And every single person is different, which is why this conversation really needs to take place, because some people have no desire to transition into a management role or in leadership, or they're actually happy where they're particularly at. They just want to they like to stay an individual contributor. I also have POs that are looking to get into more of the product strategy side, where they actually want to be moved into project management and whatnot. So having those conversations is vital in order for you to improve your team members. So building effective teams. The number one way to build effective teams is by building team culture and unity. And this is something that can happen organically, specifically when you build teams through interviewing and finding the right people for the right job. This is something that I've always been fortunate enough to, I guess, get lucky at making sure that most of my teams all click very well. It's always building that fun environment. People are excited to get work done. They're excited to work with team members. And this is something that I don't know if it's something I'm doing or if I'm just 100% lucky, but it's very important to build that team culture. And when I say build team culture and unity, I'm not saying forcing everybody to be in an after hours meetup online because that's what someone read on the internet. But just having those type of fun interactions that you have in between meetings with your team. And this is something that is extremely difficult to do in the past 2 years, and now that remote work is even more prevalent in our industry, but it is still something that's extremely important to do. And the last thing I have on here is one of the worst parts about being a leader is the responsibility of coaching up or coaching out. This is effectively now your responsibility of learning when somebody is not cut out for the position that they're currently in. As a leader, it is your responsibility. And as a leader, I feel it is my responsibility to make sure that every single one of my team members succeeds. However, that is not always the case. And being able to know when somebody is not able to be coached into the position and when the unfortunate incidents, or in some cases, you do need to be able to coach people out of the position that they're currently in, which is never a fun topic, but is definitely one that I wanted to mention because it is something that if you are looking to join in leadership, that is something you're going to have to do. All right, sorry, I skipped one. The next one that we've got is making sure that code gets released. This one is different. This is probably the biggest difference that I've noticed in the different companies that I've worked at is working with product strategies or business analysts to plan and prioritize work. I'm fortunate enough now that I have product owners on my team, and they've taken a lot of this pressure off of me. But in the past, I've had to work very closely with the strategy side of getting work planned out, figuring out what is possible within the current code base that we have, and getting a way to figure out how to get that planned and prioritized and on the team's backlog. The other thing we need to do is set expectation of teams or of your team on what the requirements are of the work to be completed. And unfortunately, this kind of requires some meetings. I currently work in the agile space. So we have the normal ceremonies where we have planning meetings on Monday, or we do 2-week sprints. We have a planning meeting on the first Monday. Sprint starts on Tuesday. We generally have a weekly backlog refinement meeting. And then obviously we have the retrospective. And the retrospective really helps with the last one, which is helping remove roadblocks quickly. Obviously, during daily stand-ups and whatnot, I don't know if I mentioned daily stand-ups, but that's another one that we find valuable. If roadblocks come up during those, it is the team lead's responsibility to make sure that we can do whatever we can to get those out, whether it means pulling in resources from other teams, cracking the whip on other teams to get them to get answers for you. It elevates that sense of responsibility when a team lead is asking somebody for help. But the retrospective is something that I extremely value, and I feel like can never be a long enough meeting, because the last, I'd say probably 5 or 6 sprints, we've actually ran over time on our retrospectives, because the conversations of how can we improve our processes is always such a valuable thing. And it's something that if you can cultivate that feeling across the entire team, it really helps the team come together to figure out what we can do to help our processes grow. And this is actually something that I was recently in Detroit talking with one of our CTOs, and he mentioned to me that his expectations of like metrics is one of the worst things that he sees is a flat line on metrics. Even if it's a good flat line, like the numbers are really good and they're flat, he would much rather see there be peaks and valleys, because that means the teams are trying new things. They're iterating on their processes. They're trying to build up how to get better. So sometimes if ideas don't work on how we can get the code out in a better way, then we know something, we learned something, but at least you're trying new things. And as a leader, that's your responsibility to facilitate those conversations. And I find that retrospectives are one of the best ways to do that. Let me check. No questions right now. Perfect. And then another responsibility that you have as a team is representing the team to the stakeholders. And again, this is kind of one of those things where as I was a young student in college, I always thought like, hey, I'll never need to be in meetings. I'm going to be writing code. And even as an engineer, I realized how wrong I was. But when you transition into leadership, the big thing is you're going to be the face of the team. You're going to be representing the team when work is completed, and talking when those new requirements are coming in or new ideas are coming in. The big thing to do is to manage expectations. And this is something that over the course of my career, I've kind of come up with a rule that I have, that when a stakeholder asks you how long something's going to take, my number one rule is never give them a time. The best response that you can ever have, in my opinion, is let me get back to you by the end of the day, and I will tell you then. When someone comes up with an idea and say, hey, how long do you think this is going to take? And if you say, oh, I don't know, I'd have to look into it, but I'm thinking around 2 weeks, I don't know if it's something in the water or anything, but subconsciously that 2 weeks is going to stick. Even if 15 minutes later you realize, oh, I forgot it's going to take 6 to 7 weeks. That 2 weeks is going to be in everybody's mind forever. So one of the things that I've learned in leadership is never give a number without doing any research. And I'm not saying that you need to prolong and say it's going to take me 5 or 10 days to get back with you. It needs to be the same day, but you need to take a chance to research all of the stuff that's involved with it and come up with a reasonable expectation. The other thing that I like to do when representing teams to the stakeholders is raising individual team members up for positive moments. This can be whether we're completing a feature and this one engineer or product owner really busted their ass on making sure that everything went out on time, and kind of just raising them on the pedestal. And at the same point, I also have a guideline that I never want to say one of my team members' names in a meeting unless it's in a positive light. If something happens, if there's a mistake, it's always a team mistake to anybody other than our team. And this is something that is just how I view leadership is, hey, this thing happened. These are the people that helped fix it, but it's never a blame game. And so as a leader, one of the things that you need to do is being able to shelter teams when mistakes happen, because mistakes happen. I know for a fact that when I was an engineer, I actually, for some reason, had read and write access to production databases. And I ran a query thinking it was, I was connected to a dev endpoint, and it was not. It was connected to a production endpoint. And luckily we had backups and we were able to get it back up to speed quickly. But the only person that knew about it was my team and my manager. And that was it, because it was not a, well, this Jason did something stupid. Because even if something did happen where there was a coaching moment, that should be handled internally. And representing your team to the stakeholder is something that's very important when it comes to positive, holding them up in a positive light. So that was my quick, real deep dive, or not deep dive, real quick view into what it's like transitioning from an engineer into a leadership. Some of the things that we talked about were what it's like to change into from a leader to a, or from an engineer to a leader. Some of the transition pitfalls, some of the problems that I had. We also discussed what some of the leaders' responsibilities and challenges are. And yeah, so before I don't know that I can open the floor up for questions or whatever. I did want to do my selfless plug. Rocket Mortgage is currently hiring. We are currently looking for, we have postings for quality engineers, for a mobile architect, for an API engineer. And then obviously if you hated my talk and you don't want to work in the same business area as me, you can just go to my Rocket Career and look for any of the other business areas that are looking for positions. But these are specifically related to mobile, which is where hopefully everybody here is interested in being. But with that, I will open it up to any questions. Here's my contact information if anybody's interested in that. I will share these slides out, so the links for the job postings and stuff will be visible. But
if you want to ask Jason some questions, just feel free to type them in the chat and he can answer them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know what your comment about, I wish I could say the same, was related to, but I wish you could say the same as well, I guess. Well, cool. Well, if there's no questions, or if not to put anybody on the spot or anything, but if you do have something that comes up, feel free to reach out to me. My email address or LinkedIn. I don't use Twitter because I think it's toxic. But you can reach out to me on the Cincy Tech Slack channel, or shoot me an email or anything like that. Oh, actually, we do got something. Patrick asked, as a leader, what keeps you up at night now? Honestly, I don't know that really anything does keep me up at night. I'm fortunate enough that my teams right now are flowing very well. The amount of code that we're getting pushed out, to me, is something that I think we need to improve upon. I'm relatively new to my team that I'm at right now. Just to give you a quick background, so I transitioned to Rocket Mortgage back in June of last year. And February of this year, I changed the product that I was on and the team that I was on. We're actually, I'm sure you guys don't follow this, but we actually just acquired a personal finance app called Truebill. And this is all public knowledge, but so we're trying to figure out what we want the mobile space to look like. So previously I was working on a Rocket Pro or the app called Rocket Pro, which was the real estate agent side of stuff. And now I'm actually on the default, the main Rocket Mortgage app. So right now, what keeps me up at night would probably just be trying to get my head wrapped around my new team, as well as getting familiar with the code base. I'm fortunate enough that at Rocket, there's no real expectation for me to know the code, but the nerd in me requires it. So what keeps me up at night is trying to go through 6 years of legacy mobile code, trying to figure out all the pain points that my team faces. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we are unable to, or we're not able to execute as quickly as I think. And it's because we have a lot of legacy code that I would like to get cleaned up. So that's probably what keeps me up at night the most, is just trying to get under better understanding of what our code base is like. Jonathan asked, since you haven't been writing code in your day jobs, do you code in your free times? Do you ever think getting back into programming? So absolutely. I mean, I still enjoy writing code. I still maintain side projects. I'm actually, I just finished up, I manage my father-in-law's grocery store website. He owns local grocery stores, and it's a terribly designed website. I will never give out the URL because I was the designer on it, and I'm not a designer. But I still maintain it, and so it requires me to update the weekly ads every single week. And I've been doing it for a while, and I just recently built a program to basically update it automatically because I was tired of doing it every week. And that's kind of, I feel like an engineer, after you do something so many times, you realize, let's find a way to automate this. So I still do that, and I'm still pretty active in the local Google community. I still follow everything. Was really hoping that Google I/O was going to be in person this year because I really wanted Rocket to pay for me to go. And I'm hoping that being at a bigger company, they can pull some strings. I doubt it. From what I hear, Google doesn't care where you work. You have to join the lottery as much as anybody else. But yeah, so I'm definitely still programming. Do I ever think about getting back into programming? I'm assuming you mean like back into like individual contributor and whatnot. I don't know. I don't think so. I really like the mindset of, like, I don't feel like I accomplished everything I could have as an engineer. But for me, the transition into leadership was really one of those things where it's just like, hey, you're the best engineer on the team. You're now the team lead. Here's all these extra responsibilities. And then my team grew to be 14 people. So all of those extra responsibilities virtually prevented me from ever writing code. So I slowly started to learn to love the leadership aspect of stuff, building up team members, coaching associate engineers. I think that's one of my biggest enjoyments out of being a leader, is that having that conversation when you have an associate engineer getting promoted to a standard engineer. Because I remember having that feeling of when I went from an associate engineer to a standard engineer to a senior engineer. Like, each one of those milestones is now something that I get to affect in each one of my team members. And it kind of like touches back to my number one priority is improving team members. That's probably the best thing about my job now as a leader, is getting to see all of those little moments that I've had happen with each one of my team members. We actually just had a team member leave Rocket because she got an offer from Apple that we obviously could not really couldn't match, and like, it was basically her dream job. So it's just like we couldn't take that from her. So we honestly didn't even try to retain her because we knew that that's exactly where she wanted to be. But as a leader, that's kind of what your job is to make sure that people have the experience and to be where they want to be. And yeah, it sucks. And as a leader, your job is also to try to retain as much of the good talent that you can. But that number one thing is just making sure that you're improving your team members to be where they want to be. And if it's at Apple or Google, it's hard to compete against that. But so yeah, I don't know that I would ever really want to go back to being an individual contributor. But I still love writing code. I still love diving into it. I mean, I was just in a one-on-one with one of my senior Android engineers the other day. and we were looking at like design systems that we have to build automated elements and whatnot. And it's still fun to jump into. But I think that's all of them.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Cool. All right. Well, with that, I will pass things back to Greg then.
I think Jonathan had one more.
Oh. For some reason, my thing's not auto-scrolling.
Yeah, mine doesn't either.
What was it like to joining an existing team from the perspective of management? Is there a lot of pushback because you're the new guy? So I'll be 100% honest. It was actually extremely challenging for me to do, not from the sense of pushback or anything from the new guy, but because it's now this remote world. It was very easy for me to be able to coach team members when I'm leading a team that I wrote the code base for. And that's kind of where I was at my previous position. I mean, I wrote all of the old code, so it was very easy for me to coach engineers into becoming better engineers because I knew where there was areas to improve upon, and I knew the code base so well. So I think that's something that I used as a crutch in the beginning of my career. Was like, okay, I know the product, and I like, because my previous company, I was there for 12 years, so I knew the product very well. I knew the code very well. And so it was very easy for me to make that transition. When I switched to Rocket, there was definitely a very eye-opening experience because now I don't have that crutch to lean on. And I think it was a good thing. I'm still very happy with my move. I actually really enjoy working for Rocket. It's a great company, and it's been a great experience. I mean, one of the big things is I don't have to wear 15 hats. I'm just a leader. I'm not the product owner and the all the different other responsibilities that I had. But the big thing that it was hard to do was to build that sense of team unity, to step into a team that already existed. Basically, I took over a team that the team lead, my most recent move, which was back in February when I moved over to Rocket Mortgage. They had a team lead leave, and so I took over that team. And that was challenging because it's like, now I got to get to know these people. They're already 100% acquainted. They already have a team culture, a team atmosphere. They have a way of running specific things. And then obviously I not trying to come in and make a bunch of changes or mess up a good thing that they have. So I'd say the biggest challenge was just being in the remote. And I've also been fortunate enough that the past couple months I've gotten to make the trek up to Detroit, since it's so close, to be able to build those relationships out with team members through taking them to lunch and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, not so much pushback. It's really just not being able to rely on knowing the code, and then being in a remote setting. Is difficult to build out those things, but also that's kind of where the one-on-ones really thrive, and being able to build out those relationships. I mean, I have one-on-ones regularly with my director, and one of the things that I do in every single one-on-one, I send him an agenda beforehand, and the last agenda item is always some stupid personal question of like, what's your favorite movie that you've watched, or what's your favorite recipe to make, or anything like that. Because it's just, and I do the same thing with my team members, because it just allows you to try to have a conversation that's not just about work. And building those relationships is extremely important for a leader and for a team to come together. So hopefully that answered your question. Cool.
All right.
Well, that works for me.
Well, thanks again, Jason. If there's no more questions, I think we can call it a meeting or call it a meetup.
I don't know how do I do this? Oh, click the share button. I will comment on the Google Meetup with a link for these slides. Again, selfless plug. There were the links for the job postings that we have, but then also the links for my contact information. If you guys do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me spiel about my career and whatnot.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.